From the TV30 studio, here is Jim Schneider.
Well, good evening and welcome to inFocus. We're glad that you've joined us for the broadcast this evening. We're going to talk about some very interesting information. Matter of fact, we're going to hit topics like fossils and rock layers and also that of even volcanoes. Is there a message that comes from geology? We're going to be looking at that message here this evening. What is that message? What is the evidence? And are we listening to the evidence that comes forth from geology, the field of geology? It's our privilege to have in the studio tonight Dr. Steve Austin, field research geologist with a Ph.D. in geology. He has just been under a quest to understand the sedimentary processes that formed rocks and fossils. He's launched explorations on 6 of the 7 continents around the globe. His research adventures have taken him by helicopter into the crater of Mount St Helens, the volcano there, by bush plane into glaciers in the high mountains of Alaska, by raft through the entire Grand Canyon, by elevator into the world's deepest coal mines, by scuba at the Great Barrier Reef, also by canoe in coastal swamps of Australia, and much more. He likes to climb mountain peaks, has experienced the hazards of mud flows, avalanches, volcanic eruptions, also that of boiling creeks, quicksand, flash floods, and encounter crocodiles and venomous snakes. It's very amazing. You have studied the Dead Sea sediments showing earthquakes and disturbances, also known for field trips and field teaching events. You've authored 3 books, contributed to many, many other books and articles, and member of several memberships, Geological Society of America, American Association of Petroleum Geologists, Society for Sedimentary Geology, International Association of Sedimentologists, and the Creation Geology Society. I don't know what you do in your spare time, but good evening, good to have you here tonight.
I'm teaching at Cedarville University too, so life is interesting. Always have something happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to get into a number of things tonight, from Mount St. Helens. We'll look a little bit at the Grand Canyon and so forth. But we have seen a lot of things happen of recently. But just tell us a little bit about yourself, Dr. Austin. I mean, I understand that your love for geology actually began as a young child.
Yes, I had a fascination with mud. I collected rocks and fossils very early. By the time I was 8 years old, I had an immense rock collection. So the teachers at school wanted me to bring in my rocks and minerals and fossils, that type of thing. And I was on television, KQED television in San Francisco, for a period of about 2 years on one of the TV programs, science education programs. And then I read George Gaylord Simpson's book, The Meaning of Evolution. So I was very familiar with what geologists were saying about evolution, and then I went to...
Did you buy into evolutionary theory?
I did. And I started going to university, and then in university I realized that these are not all the right answers that I'm getting, and I started searching and looking for alternate explanations. And I kind of became a outside-the-box thinker, maybe that's the way to say it. Where geologists have a customary way of thinking about things, there's an outside-the-box way of thinking. And so I specialized in alternate ways of looking at data and interpretation. And over the years, that's been very helpful. I think I can say I've amounted to something, and that people can tolerate somebody like me thinking outside the box.
So thinking outside the box, how are you received?
Well, originally, the professors who were teaching me say, if you continue to think like this, you won't be very much value as a geologist. And why would the oil industry hire you? Or what, how are you going to get a job? That kind of thing. And then in the 1980s, especially after Mount St. Helens exploded, geology started becoming very catastrophic. And that was the point of view that I had. And then so I got invited to speak. And people became tolerant and actually encouraging me to think outside the box. Some of my old professors even complimented me, you did amount to something, and so that felt good.
Well, we're going to look at some catastrophe here this evening and discuss it anyways. And some of the catastrophe that we've seen of just recent has been the earthquakes that have been occurring in the nation of Mexico. And certainly our hearts go out to so many lives that have been impacted, families shattered, many deaths have occurred. But as we take a look at these earthquakes, what is causing these eruptions? Why are we seeing them back to back to back earthquakes in Mexico?
Well, there's the history of big earthquakes in southern Mexico. They've been associated with the Acapulco Trench and the western edge of Mexico, this tectonic plate that slid underneath Mexico, and that's where we get the deep, big earthquakes right there. And of course, magnitude 8 earthquake at the boundary of the Pacific Plate and the North American Plate right there in southern Mexico. That is a difficult situation, and so we get these big earthquakes. And then the building practices in Mexico are not as rigorous as they could be. And earthquakes really don't kill people. It's falling buildings that kill people. And we can build buildings better. We can learn how to build buildings. And then Mexico City is built on an old lake bed, which is kind of like building on jello. You know, it can shake. And so the soils that we build on, and our foundations, are very susceptible to earthquakes. And so earthquakes should be in our mode of thinking, and they're one of the familiar disasters that we experience.
So likely more to come in Mexico then?
Yes, yes. And sometimes aftershocks, certainly from a magnitude 8 earthquake, a series of aftershocks for months. And so that's what we learn to expect as geologists.
There's been a lot of concern, too, about a major earthquake potential for Yellowstone National Park. And specifically, it's been said that there's been an earthquake swarm that's been occurring there over these last many months. Define for us, what is an earthquake swarm, and are fears legitimate for a major quake happening there?
Okay, well, these brittle rock, when it cracks, it makes an earthquake, and there's brittle rock down there that's cracking, and on a small scale, that makes earthquake swarms. Sometimes you can have an earthquake swarm by magma moving underground. That's another way it can happen. So earthquakes and swarming earthquakes, small earthquakes, those are more friendly to us than these big subduction zone earthquakes like in Mexico. And but one thing for sure, Yellowstone is an active area. You can always count on Yellowstone showing you something new and different. And all of the hot springs change, all of the geysers change. Old Faithful might not be that faithful, okay? And then, of course, earthquakes. You know, Jesus said there'd be earthquakes in diverse places. All these are the beginning of birth pangs.
So perhaps something severe happening in that region?
Yes, yes.
Okay. You study geology, you study mud, you study rock layers, you study fossils. What fascinates you the most?
Well, currently I'm studying the mud in the Dead Sea, and I'm looking for earthquake record for the historic earthquakes of the Bible in Dead Sea mud. And pinch me, I can't believe it, but you know, I have value in that I can read the sediment record that's buried in the upper 20 to 30 feet of Dead Sea mud in Israel and Jordan, and I can read the 4,000-year earthquake record. And so I'm finding some of the major biblical earthquakes as I'm digging in the mud. And I also have worked at Mount St Helens. Of course, there was an earthquake there when it erupted. Grand Canyon, I'm looking at sediment layers and fossils there. So those are the things I study. And of course, I teach my students, and I'm known for these rather extreme field trips. Okay, so I take students into Grand Canyon. I go around to Mount St Helens, into the Rocky Mountains, that kind of thing.
I mentioned in our intro this evening you've been on 6 of the 7 continents. Antarctica being the one that you have not traveled to. Is that?
That's on my bucket list.
On your bucket list,
yeah.
Okay.
I'd love to walk on the Ross Ice Shelf and see Mount Erebus, the stratovolcano on Antarctica, somewhat like Mount St. Helens.
Okay. And when is that on your calendar?
Okay.
A day to come, huh?
Yeah, a day to come.
Great. We're talking tonight with Dr. Steve Austin, and he is a geologist, and we're going to be taking a look specifically. A lot of your research has been with Mount St. Helens, and just incidentally, you were mentioning earthquakes in the Bible, and viewers, recently we had Dr. Austin on our Crosstalk radio program, and you'll find that interview at crosstalkamerica.com, and you can hear a very fascinating interview about earthquakes in the Bible. And that's just a great discussion in and of itself. But you are known for the research in Washington State on Mount St. Helens, the quake that happened there in May of 1980. Tell us what happened to the landscape, just really a super quick time in which that landscape all changed.
The volcano exploded on May 18th, 1980, and it exploded northward over the landscape as the north slope of the mountain slid away, largest landslide in recorded history. This enormous half a cubic mile of rock slid away. It released the pressure inside the volcano. The volcano did not blow vertical, it blew horizontal over the landscape. And that was the most unexpected part of the eruption, was a horizontal blast. So it took 150 square miles of forest and leveled it in about 10 minutes. And then what it was for me was it was like Disneyland. Everything is new in the 150 square mile area, and all the process that was going on after the eruption on May 18 and the following 5 or 6 big eruptions, all of that created this wonderland for study of catastrophic process geology.
So how has what has been discovered then, what your research has found, how has this just totally transformed our geological thinking?
Well, Mount St. Helens was the most informative volcanic event in the 20th century. Volcanology before 1980 and volcanology after 1980, they were changed, right? And so geologists had this big learning experience, and I was involved with that learning experience, and I learned a lot too. And I've communicated with lots of geologists and written papers and that type of thing. We saw the rapidly formed strata. We saw rapidly eroded canyons. We saw logs buried in vertical position or reburied, essentially, or replanted in vertical position in a lake next to the volcano. And then we discovered how plant material has accumulated underneath the lake.
Is that Spirit Lake?
Spirit Lake,
okay.
Yeah. And that lake next to the volcano is a giant bathtub for understanding all kinds of things. 1 million logs there, and so and then the whole landscape has been repopulated by all these new the ordinary organisms that were there before, and so it's an ecological recovery experiment, that was beyond belief. But we saw elk and gophers and all kinds of forest plants and animals that invaded the blast zone, and now there's conifer forests back out there. We thought it would take 400 years, but now the whole landscape is doing rather well as it's recovering.
So you have evidence rapid layering took place?
Yeah. There was up to 600 feet of deposits at Mount St. Helens since 1980.
Wow.
And I got to studying the layers. Now, I would have thought that the catastrophic process would turbulently mix everything and throw it out over the landscape, and we'd have a massive kind of unlayered deposit. Boy, was I wrong when these pyroclastic flows, these glowing avalanches of ash came out of the crater and flowed down the surface. they made these micro-thin layers. Very thin laminations were formed in a hurricane, believe it or not. Okay, and we there's 25 feet of one volcanic ash unit that formed in 3 hours. We have the radar imagery of the summit showing how the eruption occurred, and this 25 feet of layers is just sitting there right in front of us. And you might imagine it formed very slowly, like between summer and winter on a river floodplain or something like that. No, it didn't form slowly, not by seasonal alternation or anything like that. It formed rapidly by these glowing, very fast-moving avalanche flows.
Very fascinating, because others looking at this would say, hey, this is evidence of millions and millions of years.
Yes.
So I'm assuming then there are things that we can learn from Mount St. Helens that are definitely supportive of creation.
Yeah. When I think about Mount St. Helens, I think of the Rosetta Stone. You know, the Rosetta Stone was this rock that found in Egypt with the 3 different scripts or languages on it, 2 hieroglyphic, 1 Greek. And hieroglyphics became an extinct language. The Roman Empire suppressed hieroglyphics as a language, and they made it go extinct, essentially. And but the discovery of the Rosetta Stone allowed us to translate the Egyptian language, and it was the window into the Egyptian culture. And so it was the learning experience in this very unusual opportunity. Mm-hmm. Mount St. Helens is like that. And you know, catastrophe theory in geology was suppressed by what? Darwinism, of all things. Darwinism and the thinking about slow and gradual process caused the catastrophic way of thinking, which geologists had been accustomed to over 200 years ago. It caused that to kind of go extinct. Mm-hmm. And now Mount St. Helens exploded. It's kind of the Rosetta Stone for translating and visualizing what catastrophic process geology is like.
So do you see a connection to the very things that we've learned in that relatively short time from Mount St. Helens to have any correlations to something catastrophic in the Grand Canyon?
Yes. Okay. At Mount St. Helens, there are canyons that were eroded, especially by mud flows on March 19th, 1982. There was a whole bunch of snow in the crater at Mount St. Helens. There was a summit eruption. The eruption melted the snowpack, 15 feet or so of snowpack, displaced water behind in the crater, and this mud came down over the landscape. And essentially overnight, it cut a canyon system down to the up to 50 miles from the volcano. And so the canyon formed, and I'm looking at the canyon, it has many of the same features as Grand Canyon. We called it Little Grand Canyon of the North Fork of the Toutle River. And it has a 1/40th scale of Grand Canyon. There's cup-shaped side canyons that are kind of bowl-headed. There are these pointy side canyons that have this very narrow appearance like in Grand Canyon. Mm-hmm. And then the plateau land north and south of Grand Canyon, it's like what we see at Mount St. Helens. The breach did not occur straight through. It has a kind of a bendy path, and the canyon of the Grand Canyon is very snake-like. And so many of the same features that we see at Grand Canyon were reproduced essentially at this Little Grand Canyon by mud flow overnight at Mount St. Helens. So I think that is an amazing thing. And most geologists have junked the idea that Colorado River eroded Grand Canyon over tens of millions of years. that was what we learned in grammar school. Okay, we all
Isn't
learned
that still in textbooks today?
And there's textbooks like that, and they're kind of going out of style because geologists are not talking that way too much anymore. They're going to catastrophic process geology to explain Grand Canyon. Something unusual made Grand Canyon, like breaching of a dam, like the mud at Mount St. Helens that breached a dam. Lakes could have breached their dam on the Colorado Plateau. Could that have rapid erosion and drainage of lakes cause Grand Canyon to be eroded? Those are options that geologists are considering.
That had to be a big dam.
Yeah, and 500 cubic miles of water in a lake east of Grand Canyon. There's physical evidence of that. Okay, why not make the association? You know, big lake, big breach. Okay, that's the way geologists think.
So as we take a look then at what we've learned from Mount St. Helens, the rapid layers that are being laid down, certainly the carving out then of canyons and so forth.
Yes.
Some very significant evidences, should I say, then, for how we have the Grand Canyon, and even with what we see in Scripture as far as a worldwide flood.
Yes, so those layers in the Grand Canyon are deposited under the ocean. Okay, there's marine fossils, yet that's the plateau land is 8,000 feet above sea level. And here we see sponges and corals and crinoid fossils, organisms that are in the ocean today. Those are up on the high plateau. So what happened there? It looks like the ocean was over the continent, and rapid and catastrophic process seemed to form layers. So why not have a flood, a global flood, making strata? That's the kind of thing I like to think about.
What is the Whitmore nautiloid bed?
Okay, there's a layer in the middle of the Grand Canyon. It's a cliff. It's called the Red Wall Limestone. And in that limestone is this layer that's, I call it the Whitmore nautiloid bed. Anyway, the nautiloid bed, the nautiloid fossil is a squid in a shell. And these fossils are about the length of your arm. They taper 1:7 ratio, so they're a cone-like shell, and the squid is in one end of the shell. And so it's a squid in a shell, essentially. And then we call them nautiloids. And I've drawn pictures of thousands of these nautiloids and found them all in this one layer within the Red Wall Limestone in Grand Canyon. So the nautiloids are in one layer, and the layer goes all through Grand Canyon out to Frenchman Mountain in Las Vegas, Nevada, something like 150 miles or more. It extends east-west through the Grand Canyon region. And what killed all those nautiloids? Some kind of mud flow event. I think an underwater mud flow, many cubic miles of sediment went shooting westward across Arizona into Nevada and even into California maybe. And that's, that's what buried these creatures.
You're convinced that the rocks speak to us.
Yes, and so that's what I do for a living. I interpreting rocks and doing that kind of thing. And of course, we find fossil logs at Mount St. Helens. Standing upright, we have trees that look like they grew there, but they're on the bottom of Spirit Lake. And there was no forest there before the eruption. So what happened? These logs have been redeposited in the bottom of this lake as if they were rooted and grew there. And so the so-called forests are called into question. At Yellowstone, we have what's called Specimen Ridge and the petrified forests at Yellowstone, Lamar River area. And in that region in northeastern Yellowstone, there's 27 distinct layers with logs with their penetrating vertically through the strata layers, looking like they're successive forests. And after Mount St. Helens, geologists started questioning the signs at Yellowstone National Park. In fact, I was talking to the chief ranger about the sign that said there are 27 different forests that grew over millions of years, and the stumps are still standing where they grew millions of years ago, that type of thing. I was talking to the ranger, and the ranger said, boy, that sign has become very controversial. I said, are you interested in why that sign has become controversial? It's maybe because what we've seen at Mount St. Helens, you know, how the logs are redepositing and mud flows, and the process that buries these logs might be what's involved with Specimen Ridge there in Yellowstone National Park. And then the sign disappeared. Okay, it became so controversial, I guess, that they retired the sign. They didn't put a new sign up, but you know, that's the way the Park Service is. Signs wear out, but the point is that we have new ways of thinking after Mount St. Helens that help us understand petrified forests, like at Yellowstone National Park.
How long after we had the eruption of Mount St. Helens, how long had that occurred before you first examined the location?
Well, I was at Mount St. Helens before the eruption. I'm a student at University of Washington, so Mount St. Helens was always my favorite volcano, if you will.
Okay.
And but I got back in there very early, 3 years after the eruption, and the Department of Agriculture gave me a permit to go into the closed zone and start doing research there. And of course, you'd sign away your name on the form. You know, the government has no responsibility to rescue you, and you're doing this of your own initiative. Here's a key to the gate. You can go into the blast zone. Keep in radio contact. You know, that kind of thing. And so that's what we did. We'd go out there, make these observations, and then we'd check out at night. I don't like camping at a volcano, an active volcano. I would leave at night and get away from the active area where volcanoes. I had one experience where I was breathing compressed air on scuba in the lake when I surfaced, and there was ash coming out of the crater. And so I experienced a small eruption one time when I was there doing research in the lake. So.
The most important lessons from Mount St. Helens, how would you describe those?
Rapid stratiformation, rapid canyon erosion, rapid burial of logs to make what appear to be petrified forests, rapid accumulation of tree bark in the bottom of the lake, looking like the first step for the formation of coal, and the rapid recovery of the ecosystem. There's 5 things that really are talking points generated by Mount St. Helens.
Wow.
Everything at Mount St. Helens shows you how catastrophic process geology can explain things. And you know, our customary way of thinking is very, what would you say, experience-based. And we don't know a lot about catastrophic process because we tend to live somewhere else. And you know, there's that scripture that says, you know, scoffers will come in the last days saying all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation, 2 Peter chapter 3. That's a prophecy about our day. We have a tendency to dwell on thinking about slow and gradual process. Everyday conventional experience explains everything. That's what Mount St. Helens, that's the take home from Mount St. Helens, is that rapid process probably does most of the explanation of what we see in the rock strata record. So we can understand history from this Rosetta Stone of Mount St. Helens.
Dr. Steve Austin, our guest here tonight on inFocus, and just for your interest, he is going to be speaking Tuesday evening, September 26th at 6:30 p.m. for the Creation Science Society of Milwaukee. Their meeting this month will be held at Grace Bible Church, that's 2643 South 117th Street in West Dallas. and would like to just mention that he is going to be speaking on Mount St. Helens, Rosetta Stone of Catastrophic Geology. And you are welcome, the public is welcome to attend. If you'd like more information on this, you can visit the website genesismatters.org, genesismatters.org, and you'll find the information pertaining to this. We're going to open our phone lines tonight, and we've got more things to talk about here with Dr. Austin, but perhaps if you have a question as it pertains to geology, you're welcome to call here this evening, and he'll take your calls, your questions. If you wish to talk specifically about the fossil record, we didn't get a whole lot into fossils at this point yet, but the fossil record or what we've learned from Mount St. Helens or the Grand Canyon, certainly pick up your phone, give us a call. Earthquakes, pick up your phone, give us a call. Our number is 414-935-3030. 414-935-3030. Toll free at 800-733-8830. That's 800-733-8830. Perhaps there are things that have stumped you as it relates to geology. Dr. Austin has studied it for many decades now and certainly is open to take your questions here this evening. He does teach on a university level as well. He has had numerous trips to Grand Canyon. You mentioned over 500 nights that you have slept in Grand Canyon.
Below the rim.
Below the rim. And in addition to that, of course, the many expeditions that have taken him worldwide in studying the field of geology. Catastrophic geology in particular. So we'll take your calls tonight, 935-3030 or 800-733-8830. We have Alan calling from Racine, Wisconsin. Hi, Alan, you're on the air.
Hi, this is Alan, and Dr. Austin, I thank you for coming here today and stuff. And at the beginning of this talk, you said you have found out that people that scientists and stuff were hearing or having a tolerance to your speaking and stuff. And what I was wondering, if in all your talks and stuff as a born-again believer of the Bible, have you found that people have come to salvation and their lives changed, both in scientists, people and stuff like that, and believe in Jesus Christ and His Word is truth?
Okay, thank you, Alan.
Good question. I've learned that people can tolerate my outside-the-box thinking. Okay, and now they're even encouraging it. Okay, my outside-the-box thinking is showing value, like for interpreting Grand Canyon or Yellowstone, that type of thing. And occasionally I'm asked to give papers and speak. So I go to science meetings. That's the main place where I interact with professional geologists. In 2012, I did a paper on the Jerusalem earthquake of 33 AD, which was interesting. I wanted to see what the geologic community would say. And of course, the earthquake of 33 AD is likely the earthquake at the Cross. And I'm seeing evidence of the earthquake of 33 AD in Dead Sea sediment. And of course, we have the passage in Matthew that says there was an earthquake at the cross, also an earthquake at the empty tomb. Matthew 27 and Matthew 28 record those earthquakes. And so I was given a paper on those earthquakes, and geologists come around and started talking to me. A lot of people took my card and talked to me privately other times about that. I found about 50 geologists that liked me talking about Scripture and having the Bible on the wall. Now, it's okay to have Scripture references at a science meeting if you're presenting a paper on an earthquake in 33 AD. Why not have Matthew 27? That's data, right? That's an eyewitness report of an earthquake. So that that's the rules when you when you're talking about earthquakes in history is you bring up the historic data regarding it, and then you do the analysis of the earthquake, like in the sediment that I've done. So that's part of what I do, plus challenging geologists just to think about creation and the flood. Darwinism has suppressed geology and geologic understanding to some degree, and we need to sweep the dirt out from under the rug. The rug is lumpy, and 150 years of Darwinism has basically thwarted some of these discoveries in geology.
And certainly we have seen men come to faith who were of the evolutionary mindset, but when they started looking at the evidence, saw that the very tenets of Scripture were exactly as they claimed to be. I think of people like Dr. John Whitcomb, even as a theologian who was a very avowed atheist at one point, who started studying and examining the evidence and came up with a totally different conclusion.
And I was an evolutionist to start with, and I fortunately got a direction that was beneficial. And so this is important that we're talking this way.
Dr. Steve Austin, our guest here tonight. We've got some open phone lines, and we welcome your calls here this evening. Questions pertaining to geology, questions about fossils, Grand Canyon, certainly Mount St. Helens. Our lines are open. We'll make them available to you, 414-935-3030. That's 414-935-3030. Toll free at 800-733-8830. That's 800-733-8830. What would you say is the most unusual fossil that you have found?
For me, the nautiloids are the most unusual fossil. A squid in a shell. They're big, and I've seen probably thousands of them. I've drawn pictures of 1,000, but there may be billions of them out there. And just thinking about the colossal scale of the way fossils occur and how they occur on Earth that's the unusual thing. I look at fossils as sedimentary objects that help me understand how the Earth formed.
And quickly explain, if you would, how a fossil does form. What does it take? What are the ingredients?
It takes rapid burial and hard parts. Those are the two things you need to have a fossil. And hard parts to mineralize, and then you need rapid burial to get it away from the oxygen, so the bony material or the plant tissue doesn't decay. Now, in dinosaur situations, we probably don't even need hard parts. When rapid burial occurs, you can actually petrify or non-petrify tissue, and it can stay tissue. So soft tissue of dinosaurs is now being, and other fossils, is being found and described pretty widely now. And so that's what fossilization is like: rapid burial and hard parts. But now we don't even need hard parts as long as we have rapid burial. And it doesn't want to be millions of years old. How can dinosaur tissue, flexible dinosaur tissue, be preserved over millions of years? That is incredible. So we're living in the time when there is this physical evidence appearing that fossilization is very amazing.
Yeah. Let's go to Jeff calling from Racine. Hi, Jeff. You're on the air.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I just wanted to ask the doctor about Stonehenge. I mean, over the years, we always hear like some weird things about Stonehenge, like everything from aliens, or I was wondering if you knew anything about the facts about what Stonehenge is, or if you can clear up any of the things just to make it clear. Thanks. That's all I had to say.
Okay, thank you, Jeff.
Well, I was on a geologic field trip from Bristol, England, over to Wales, and I was driving over there to see the coal beds and the sandstone layers in Wales. And as I was driving back from my field trip, I'm looking over my shoulder, and I see on the horizon these these rocks standing with flat rocks on top, and that's how I encountered Stonehenge. I found it by accident, if you will, okay, off the road driving back. And I haven't spent a lot of time studying it. I don't have an opinion about it. It's obviously rocks that have been made by human activity. We think that people back thousands of years ago had poor technology. Maybe not. There's high-tech kind of things like buildings, pyramids, and constructions. And Stonehenge certainly is an engineering marvel, ancient engineering marvel. Just think of it that way.
Mm-hmm. Let's go to Kirk, calling from Oak Creek. Hi, Kirk, you're on the air.
I am just calling to see if your guest has any, proof of any transitional stage that has been found in any fossil record. As far as I know, there is no transitional form, found in fossil record that would show one transition from one type to another.
Okay, it's interesting that Darwin has caused us to start speculating on what we haven't found or what we don't see. And that's what the discussion of transitional forms has been largely, is a discussion about what we rarely see or don't see. Mm-hmm. And so it's not the highest form of science. You know what I mean? Science is dealing with the things we see. Now, there are some stratomorphic intermediate fossils that could be called transitional forms, but maybe not. So what is obvious in the stratigraphic record of fossils is they abrupt appearance, and they stay the same, and then they disappear. That's the typical thing. The old idea of the tree of life, the Darwin idea that there was one organism, a simple cell that evolved, and then all the complexity evolved from it in some kind of tree-like family tree of life, that's been largely disputed because we haven't found the fossils that make that kind of record.
Mm-hmm. Any follow-up, Kirk?
I guess the other thing would be, everybody says that, we're looking for a missing link, but I just, looking back in fossil records.
Yeah, we have a missing chain.
Also kind of show the flood, right?
Right.
So the remainder of evidence of the flood, I think.
Yeah, so rapid burial and, ecosystems are buried. That's and there are organisms that stay the same. Clams have always been clams. Snails have always been snails. Ants have always been ants. Dragonflies have always been dragonflies. Lycopod trees have always been lycopod trees. So you can point to the fossil record and argue for stasis. Things remain the same. Mm-hmm. And that seems to me, abrupt appearance and stasis remaining the same is what the fossil record shows. Not descent from a common ancestor with imaginary missing links.
Yeah. Thank you, Kirk.
Thank you.
Appreciate your call. Telephone number is on the screen. We have lines available, 414-935-3030. That's 414-935-3030, toll free at 800-733-8830. Dr. Steve Austin is our guest here tonight. He's a geologist, and if you missed the location where he's speaking tomorrow night, we'll be providing that here near the end of the program, so watch for that. Let's go next to Lloyd in Mayville. Hi, Lloyd, you're on the air.
Yes, my question is, I'm a believer of the creation, and my question is, have they ever found fossils of the American horse or the American bison? I know they found saber-toothed lions and mastodons and so on. That's my question.
Okay, thank you.
I've found fossils of horse and deer in frozen soils of Alaska, and but the question is, were there horses, big horses in the past, like horses that we have today? There's other smaller horses and that type of thing. It looks like we have prairie land today, and we have this environment that favors big horses, whereas browsing horses, small horses that nibble, more like deer, something like that, those type of horses were around, and we see the fossil record for them. So things were different then, but horses have always been horses. Rabbits have always been rabbits, and that's what the fossil record shows, which favors creation after its kind, right? Mm-hmm. That's what Genesis says.
Yeah, and variation within the kind.
And there's variation within the kind, quite a bit of variation, mm-hmm. perhaps. Small horses that are browsing kind of animals with more like paws instead of hoofs, but still definitely horse. And and that's what the fossil record shows.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Lloyd. Okay, have our number available, 414-935-3030, 414-935-3030, toll free at 800-733-8830. Before these last few calls, you were talking about dinosaurs and finding that tissue, soft tissue,
yes.
Dinosaurs, and it was not but just a couple months ago that we saw in, I believe it was a Newsweek magazine, about the nodosaur found up in by coal miners in Canada, but a fully intact dinosaur.
Okay, so there's all kinds of fossil material that's showing up, mm-hmm. and we probably need to be rather expectant to find and discover new things. Mm-hmm. And that's the way it is. There are islands up in the archipelago in the Arctic Ocean, North Islands of Canada, that have frozen spruce tree, essentially as peat on these islands. The islands are the peat's supposed to be 18 million years old or something like that, but we're pulling out the seeds and we're seeing genetic material. Maybe you ought to plant them to see if they grow, that kind of thing. So who knows the things that are going to be discovered.
Yeah.
And stay tuned. We'll have some more fossils.
Do you live in expectation what is going to be found next?
Yeah, I think some of those, soft dinosaur tissue could be found, could seeds. Mm-hmm. Okay, and seeds could be grown. Okay, maybe.
Wow.
So that's wild to think that way.
Mm-hmm. And again, our line is available, 414-935-3030, toll free, 800-733-8830. Let me just mention here quickly, Dr. Austin is speaking Tuesday evening, and he is going to be at, this is for the Creation Science Society of Milwaukee. They're holding their meeting at Grace Bible Church, 2643 South 117th Street in West Dallas. And he'll be taking a look more specifically at Mount St. Helens, the Rosetta Stone of catastrophic geology. And you'll be using PowerPoint presentation?
PowerPoint and visual graphics of still images and even moving images of the blast zone at Mount St. Helens.
So admission is free for that. You can check out the website genesismatters.org. That's genesismatters.org. Let's get to Alan Racine. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Al Friedrich once again, and I was just wanted to make a statement again to Doctor. I belong to Creation Research Institute, and I have read your name before in my magazine every week, and I mean every month.
And Alan, what is your question?
But anyway, what I was wondering if you can relate to our glaciers and stuff, how it keeps churning around and showing up and stuff, just like you were saying about lava and stuff, and how it keeps churning as it goes along and builds its way and stuff.
Okay, is there a similarity with glaciers?
Glaciers are probably a post-flood geologic feature. And during the flood, the year of the flood, there was a lot of heat generated. And to have an ice age with flowing glaciers, what do you need? Well, you don't need just cold. Making the atmosphere cold would dry it out and make a little bit of snow. But what you need is heat and cold to make an ice age. The heat to make evaporation occur over the ocean. So if you had a hot Arctic Ocean at the end of the flood, you'd have a lot of evaporation. You could have essentially a hurricane set up where warm air with humidity over the ocean comes over the continents. And of course the continents are cool, and there's lots of volcanoes and things going off, so the cooling of the continent makes the warm and cold ice age. And so I think we had a mild ice age, a rather mild ice age from a hot ocean and cold continents after the flood. And these ice caps formed rapidly and moved and melted off. And the Earth went from the cold and warm condition to the warmer condition that we have today.
And there's some relation to, and perhaps also some outside your field, but we've been hearing a lot about global climate change taking place and so forth. Do you buy into the hysteria of Al Gore?
I'm familiar with it, but no. You're going to have climate change, and there's always climate change to talk about. But anthropogenic global warming has been overstated by Al Gore and some others. I climbed Kilimanjaro to see the ice field on top of Kilimanjaro that Al Gore talked about, and his experience with it was, I think, substandard. But he was talking about how pitiful the ice field is. But it's not a glacier area. It's a volcano on the equator, and at 19,000 feet, you're not going to have a glacier in Africa. So the story is spun a little bit differently than I would like to spin it. But certainly, we've had climate change associated with the coming out of the ice age, and everybody talks about the weather, but nobody does much about it. That's the thing we learn from these discussions.
Now, do you have further trips? Are you taking further opportunity to go look at and examine Mount St. Helens and the layers and so forth?
I'm talking about doing a 40th anniversary trip to Mount St. Helens, maybe a 9.5 mile hike to the Little Grand Canyon of the North Fork of the Toutle River. A round trip hike. That would probably be in August 2020, right? Wow, we're getting
close.
Getting close. So that'd be the 40th anniversary of Mount St. Helens. I want to go another trip in Grand Canyon. I'm thinking about leading a raft trip through Grand Canyon in 2019. And I like going to Alaska, so that's on my list. And sooner or later, I'll get down to Antarctica, where I haven't been.
Great. And so you are you're leading groups too?
Yes.
Okay. And
educational groups.
Educational groups. How is it people can be a part of these groups?
I have an administrative assistant, and you can find the phone number at creationadventures.com. creationadventures.com. The phone number is the way probably to contact my administrative assistant about what I'm doing next. I need somebody to follow me and keep track of where I am located, and then if I'm located at a place where I can do an educational event, I'll do that. I'm leading students at Cedarville University, geology students, on geology field trips as well. So I have favorite field trip areas that I take my students.
We're going to squeeze one last call in tonight, and this is James calling tonight from Kenosha. Good evening, James.
Good evening. Here's my question. I'm a science teacher, and I like to get the students thinking about creation, evolution, and intelligent design. And I will frequently ask them, what would a creation scientist think about this? What would an evolutionary scientist think? What would an intelligent design scientist think, to get them thinking in terms of, there are people out there with doctorate degrees who think differently. And do you think that's a good approach? Is there something else I could use that would be similar to that would be helpful to the students?
I think you got a very good educational method there. You want to teach both evolution and creation ways of thinking. And the two-model approach, I think, is the way to teach students how to think. Not what to think, teach them how to think. And now Mount St. Helens is an adventure on how to think, what to think and how to think, so Mount St. Helens or some experiences like that is a good way to teach natural disaster geology. And so natural disasters are the key to the past, not the present is key to the past. If you're able to teach that way of thinking, science discovery, kids should do really well. I would encourage you to teach two-model approach. Don't teach how bad evolution is and how good creation is. Have your students examine both critically and then make their own decision.
Great. Just one other question related to that is how many intelligent design scientists are there with doctorate degrees compared to those who are creation scientists with doctorate degrees? Any idea?
Well, some of the people who are intelligent design scientists are obviously creationists. Okay, and so they're around. Many of the intelligent design people don't want to name God, as being the designer. I don't know why that is, but obviously from Scripture we know His eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen from the things which are made, and so I think we should call attention to biblical creation when we point to design. They follow each other. And I don't think we have to put our brains into a holding pattern or say, woe is me, I'm unclean in the way I'm thinking about this subject. No, we need to teach both. Great. And teach them well.
James, thanks for the call. We're out of time here this evening. Dr. Steve Austin has been our guest, and Dr. Austin, thank you for being with us here this evening.
Thank you, Jim, for having me on your program.
And folks, just a reminder, speaking tomorrow evening, Tuesday night, and again, that's at the Grace Bible Church in West Dallas. The meeting gets underway at 6:30 p.m., free admission. Check out genesismatters.org if you'd like more information about our guest tonight. And to contact his assistant, go to creationadventures.com. That's creationadventures.com. Thanks for joining us tonight on TV30's In Focus program. Trust you'll have a very blessed good evening.